What does it take for a facilitator to make workshops work? How can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and that actually leads to sustainable results? My name is Miriam Hapness, and it is my mission to help you to make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Pam Hamilton, the author of the workshop book and a capabilities consultant and the managing director of the consultant company Paraffin. She joins me for a conversation on facilitation in general and what it takes to be a sound facilitator who helps groups to harvest their collective intelligence. So stay tuned. Good morning, Pam.
Hi, Miriam. How are you?
I am very well. I'm happy to have you here today for our conversations on workshops.
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about workshops. Always happy to talk about workshops.
Yes, when I read your book, the workshop book, my first thought was, I want to speak to this lady and I would love to have her on my podcast. So today is the day. And I'm looking forward to learn more about your concept and ideas about workshop facilitation and also mainly about your bridge project and your key learnings. But maybe before we jump into the conversation, I would be curious to just hear your story. So how did you end up writing the workshop book? What fascinated you about workshops?
Thanks, Miriam. Well, I studied psychology, so I've always been interested in how people behave, mainly with each other. I've also got an obsession with collective intelligence, and I've been to quite a few conferences and done quite a lot of research around collective intelligence. This term collective intelligence was initially created by MIT, and people started to measure how big groups of people, millions and thousands of people, and also small groups of people, were able to collaborate together effectively. And it's been proven time and time and again through different kinds of research that people can be collectively more clever than the most clever person in the team. So even if the most clever person in the team is incredibly effective and productive, people, when they're working together, can do even better than that. But they have to have the right behaviors. And collective intelligence, there's lots of different evidence around it. But one of the things that we know is that the right behaviors to engender collective intelligence are the ability to share your views but listen to other people's views, the ability to be empathetic and understand other people's ideas as well as your own. Also, the ability to have a little bit of conflict around any question, because if we're all too nice to each other for the sake of politeness, it means that we don't challenge each other. And diverse perspectives and diverse opinions and diverse people with diverse backgrounds is one of the most important things about making a group collectively intelligent. So I had all of this research in my mind, and I've been working as a workshop facilitator now for about 20 years. And I always knew that it was my calling, and I always knew that I wanted to write a book about it. So I've been collecting a lot of research for quite some time. And obviously the book brings together that research and also the different kinds of workshops that we've been able to run. And I'm super delighted to share it with people because I feel like, well, the way that we behave with each other, the way that we are constructive with each other, positive with each other, creative with each other, that's what motivates me. I really want people to work very, very well together. And I'm very happy for everybody to work in this way. And I would love for people to change their culture and work together better.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I wonder when you say collective intelligence and what happens and what does it take to unleash this collective intelligence? So you get these diverse people into a room, and especially if you have the potential for conflict, which can be very creative, but it can also be very destructive. So what does it take for a facilitator or a host to really unleash this potential?
Lots of different things, Miriam. So I sometimes feel like it's almost like hosting a meal where you would never invite people around and then as they arrive think, oh, what am I going to cook? What are we going to do? How will I decide how to cook this?
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to consider in advance, what's the right time of day? You need to consider in advance, who shall I invite? Then you need to think about, what is it that I'm going to give people that makes the best use of their time? What food will I prepare? So in the same way with a workshop, to make sure that you get the best collective intelligence, there's a couple of key ingredients. For me, the first one is prep work. And it's really, really important that before people turn up at any meeting, even if it's a 1-hour meeting or a 1-week meeting, people have somehow thought about it in advance. And I don't mean a pre-read, like, send people 200 slides and hope that they've read it, but nobody ever does. I don't mean a pre-read. Yeah. I mean something to get their brain thinking, to frame them or to prime them in that way, and priming people to consider the topic. Often I don't give people something that takes a lot of time to prepare. It's often a thought or an opinion that I want them to bring, or a short case study I want them to bring. So for example, if we're doing something on customer experience, I would just say to people, bring a story about absolutely terrible customer experience that you had, or bring a story of an absolutely brilliant customer experience that you had. So in the prep work, I'm trying to get people to have an emotional, personal, opinion-based reaction that they don't have to do a lot of work to create, but they're bringing some feeling with them. So that priming is really an important ingredient. And then obviously the people that you invite. So we tend to get stuck in, this is the team, they're always on the project, that's who we're going to invite. But actually, if you want the best collective intelligence, you need to consider who can you invite that brings fresh perspectives, that brings expert knowledge, who might be completely naive about the project and not know anything, and could they ask some obvious questions? So, never just invite the same old people because that's who you always have invited. Make sure you try and get some fresh perspectives.
Break out of autopilot.
Exactly. Break out of, in fact, all of this is about breaking out of autopilot.
Yeah.
I think that's, I'm writing a new book at the moment on supercharged teams. So how, the best tools that the best teams in the whole world use. And I think the one thing that I am finding out again and again is when we fall into habits of behavior, and sometimes those habits of behavior are unproductive or frankly bad, why do we carry on? I mean, why don't we stop and reset, turn it off and on again, start again, think about what our rules of engagement are and move forward in positive ways. So, rethink who comes along to the meeting if you've got a specific task in mind. And then the other ingredients are stimulus and inspiration. So, if you walk into the same room with the same people and the same information, how on earth will you come up with anything different? You won't. Yeah. So even if you do walk into the same room with the same people, why not bring some fresh information? And often these are very simple things like bringing a case study from a completely different category or business, but has the same kind of need at its heart, or bringing in somebody who is, let's say, from a completely different team or brand and getting them to talk about what they've done on the topic. Any kind of fresh perspective, whether you prepare it as a facilitator or whether you ask other people to prepare it. And in fact, going back to prep work, you can often ask people to bring that inspiration for you, because if you ask every single person in the team to each bring one case study, then you've already got amazing stimulus right there and your job is done for you.
How would you then include it in the workshop? Would you make it part of the check-in or a brain dump or...
Yes. So I personally don't believe in icebreakers or energizers that aren't related to the topic, because I feel like we don't have a lot of time, to make use of every minute. So what I would tend to do is ask people to use their prep work as an introduction exercise. So, back to the customer experience example, Miriam, great to see you here today. Please tell us who you are, where you work, and tell us about your terrible or amazing customer experience. And of course, that ticks off, you get to say who you are. You get to give people a story which they really enjoy hearing. Yeah. And they find out a little bit more about yourself because you're giving them some information that's not work related necessarily. So I would tend to use it as an icebreaker, or I would tend to put a section in where people in small groups share their prep work with each other. But the one important thing I've learned is you have to respect. If you've asked people to do something, they need to give
Yes.
They need to get
Otherwise
the chance.
it's so frustrating.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah, it feels like a waste of time. Why did I spend this time and nobody wants to hear it now?
Exactly.
Yes.
And also, the other thing I've learned is don't spring on people an introductions exercise or icebreaker 5 minutes before they start. That is terrifying. I mean, I'm a very confident person and I've been working in the industry for many years. But if someone walks in and goes, okay, we're going to ask you to do this random icebreaker about, I don't know, your favorite animal or, you know, something like that, I get really worried about what I've said. Did I say the right one? Oh my goodness, I sounded like a fool. You know, you need to give people just a bit of warning, you know, the day before or whatever, just to make sure that they've had a chance to think about it.
Yeah, especially if it's really closely related to the workshop topic, because also then they might have the pressure that they want to contribute some quality. And as you said, don't want to make a fool out of themselves.
Definitely, definitely.
So on your LinkedIn profile, I think I saw that you mentioned that you help leaders to develop workshop capabilities. So beside these ingredients that you need to host a successful workshop, meaning unleashing collective intelligence, what are the key capabilities that you would emphasize in a facilitator?
So I believe anyone can be a facilitator. I know it seems more natural that extroverts are facilitators, but indeed, we've trained lots of introverts to be facilitators because in my view of facilitators, a facilitator is not someone standing at the front of the room with a pen and a blank flip chart. That's, for me, the old school facilitator, right? The person who's standing at the front of the room, who seems to know what they're doing, almost with no preparation and lots of charisma. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's good if you can do that. But actually, for me, facilitation is all about preparation, preparing the stimulus, preparing the prep work, preparing the templates, so that even an introvert can stand up in front of everybody. And because they know exactly what's coming, the templates can speak for themselves, the materials can speak for themselves. So the capabilities of, for me, a good facilitator are excellent preparation, an excellent understanding of what could go wrong and working out that in advance, being able to be confident enough to intervene when people don't do what you've asked for them to do, because people will start to test you. So, you know, if you've said no mobile phones and then someone starts using their phone, you know, the temptation is to think, oh, I'm not going to say anything, I'm so embarrassed. But you kind of have to. And whether you say it as a joke or whether you make a point of it, you have to say, look, the reason I said no phones, if you don't mind, is because we need to respect each other's time. So would you mind, you know, please feel free to leave the room if you need to look at your phone, but, you know, would you mind? And you need to sort of intervene quite early. So you've got to have even if you're not an extrovert, you have to have a certain inner confidence to be able to stick with what you said.
And natural authority, I would even say.
Yes, and I think that exactly. And I don't think that natural authority doesn't come from, we tried never to use the word bossy or to use the teacher analogy, or because I don't think the confidence comes from telling people what to do. The confidence comes from persuading people that this is the right thing to do because you've thought about it longer than they have and you know where it's going.
And respecting the remaining group.
Definitely. I mean, honestly, I'm so glad you said that, because it has to have respect at its heart. Yeah. You have to be very empathetic so you can see who's not comfortable, and you have to be super respectful. The worst thing you can do is underestimate the intelligence of the group or treat them in a patronizing way that makes people kind of angry or insulted. So in everything I do, I mean, I remember when I did a workshop in Japan, which was honestly one of my favorite and most difficult workshops I ever did. We were worried about the preparation of it because it was bringing together an international team of global heads plus local heads in the Japanese market. And of course, the Japanese heads of the business knew their market, knew their people, knew their consumers, and knew what they were doing. The global heads wanted to collaborate with them without disrespecting that knowledge. And me coming in as a female rather than a male facilitator and, you know, ostensibly telling people what to do could have been a disastrous situation, especially as I'm not Japanese. And so what we did was, and I've had a lot of preparation and some coaching from some Japanese business people and Japanese women, where the way that we facilitated it was a very respectful request at every point. So, respectfully, I would very much like for you to consider, this template that I'm about to give you that you can work on. If you don't like the template, or if you can think of it, doing it in a better way, please go ahead. But if you are happy to do it in this way, would you mind? And in a way, that's how I ask. Doesn't matter whether people are Japanese or not. That's how I ask for people to do things. It's a respectful request with an explanation. It's never just an instruction. It's always got an explanation around it.
One thing that I'm very curious about, to hear your opinion, is how would you deal with the situation where, for instance, the highest person in the hierarchy says, oh, I would love to join the workshop, but I can only come halfway in and I only have 2 hours. So how would you deal with those who come in and leave but cannot commit to the full thing?
Well, in my book, the workshop book, I call them poppers and floaters. So you get some people who say, I'm just going to pop in and I'm just going to pop out. Mm-hmm. And then the floaters are the ones who go, I'm just going to float at the back. I won't participate. I'm just going to observe. And basically, no is the answer. You can't do that. So, either you need to be there from the beginning. It's okay for people to leave halfway through, but they can't start halfway through because they're not part of the group and they come in out of context. And often they bring terrible behaviors with them that you have already managed to get rid of. Yeah. So people can't, they can come early and then leave if they really, really need to, and you can explain that to the rest of the team. But it's like dealing with difficult behaviors in a workshop. You have to know what you're going to get in advance. And so if someone has given you a request to come in late or to leave early or to float at the back, you have to address that in advance and say, look, I'm really sorry, but that's not going to work in this situation. So either come for the beginning, for the first half hour of the objectives, say what you think and then leave and then come back at the end, or let us do the workshop and we'll come back to you with the results. But because it's a collaborative, participative process, it's not possible to include people who are not part of the team. Yeah. I feel very strongly about people who say that they want to float and observe, because that is a really bad disturber of behavior, because you're sitting there on your table working on something, and usually the most important person in the room suddenly pops up and wants to listen to what you're saying, and all of your thinking gets disturbed, and they're not hearing it in context, and they go away again, and it's actually really destructive. So I say to people, if you want to be at the workshop, you have to participate fully, and I mean in every group, doing every prep work task, introducing yourself in the same way. I mean, I've had clients in a consumer co-creation workshop saying, well, I'm not going to introduce myself because it's only for the consumers to introduce themselves. Right. and again, you really have to intervene and say, this is about respectfully creating a collaboration culture. You can't put yourself separate to the people in the room. If you don't want to be part of it, please don't be there. That's fine. Yeah. So, I'm quite specific about and sometimes you have to talk people through that. You have to talk them through it and say, would you like to not attend, or would you like to attend but fully participate?
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it's also, again, part of the respect that you want to maintain in a workshop space, because if someone drops in late, then you either have to summarize what has happened before, and this will just take so much time from the rest of the group, or you just let them jump in unprepared without a briefing, and then they cannot really contribute.
Both.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like this hierarchical free environment that you can establish throughout a workshop. And I haven't thought this through yet, but it's just an idea that just popped up in my mind, that maybe workshops work best if you don't have clear hierarchies in the room.
Yes, I mean, I completely agree. It needs to feel non-hierarchical. The problem is you can't ignore the fact that the most important person in the room is sitting on your table, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that. So what we tend to do is, first of all, set up the behaviors sometimes before the workshop to say to people, we will be asking you not to be on your phones. We will be making you participate fully. Everyone will do the prep work, so we set up those behaviors and show people that this is a different meeting to normal. And then on the day, set up the behaviors of, this is a non-hierarchical, I will be asking everybody to contribute. No one opinion is worth more than the other yet, until the decision-making phase and when people can take some decisions. So the first thing that I do to disturb hierarchy is not to give the most important people in the room more of a voice than the others. Mm-hmm. And a very easy way to do that is and this is the way I do all my facilitating, is to put people into small groups. So groups of 3 or 4, and they only ever speak to a group around them of 3 or 4. There is never a chance for one person to dominate the whole room while everybody else listens, ever. The only time when people are presenting back is they're presenting back their group's ideas or templates or thinking. They're never presenting their own. They never have a platform for their own. So that's one
aspect of the check-in, I guess.
Yeah, in the check-in, but in the check-in, everybody gets the chance to check in, right? So they're not doing a long speech. And then in those groups, if let's say there's one very important person in the room, I would rotate them so that they're in a different group for each section. Mm-hmm. And I would rotate everybody all the time, by the way. So people are always in different groups through the day. Or if there's 5 important people, then I rotate them as well so that everyone gets a chance to work with them. But yeah, you have to disturb behaviors by disturbing habits. And the habits are upset by the fact that there is no chance for them to dominate. And a very small technique of how to stop people from dominating is, and this really works, by the way, with anyone who's got either many different languages in the room, or many different nationalities, or different levels of confidence, where some people are very dominant and some people are really introverted. It's a super simple technique. All you do is you say to people, you ask them whatever question it is that you want to ask them. Let's say, can you come up with with one idea of how we can reframe this objective? And you say to everyone, I want you to write it down first on a Post-it. And then you'll probably have the most dominant person starting and going, and then you have to say, sorry, do you mind? The reason why I'm asking everyone to write it down is so that we get the diversity of everybody's opinions first. And if one person starts talking, everyone else will lose their own thought and will listen to that person. So I'm going to ask you to please all write something down. And you'll find some people write down 3 Post-its. Some people struggle to write down 1. That's fine. Keep them going and say to them, when you're ready. And then everybody just has to read out their Post-it and you take it from them, which means that the most quiet person in the room gets just as much of a chance as the most dominant person in the room, but everybody is represented. And then obviously psychologically, you can see your own Post-it with your own verbatim on the wall and you feel represented. And what that starts to do then is you can theme those. Let's say it's a reframed objective, and you can see that 5 people made a reframed objective around this theme and only 2 people around that theme. So 5 people is probably the theme we should follow, right? So you start to somehow democratize people's opinion by enforcing a diverse perspective first and then bring it all together rather than letting it be purely verbal.
And a question that then comes to my mind, also given your background being a psychologist, to what extent would you do some research on the personality types joining your workshop? And if so, would you adjust your workshop design accordingly?
Definitely, yes. I mean, I don't do any formal research on them like personality tests, but I would always ask somebody to talk me through who are the different people in the room. Are there any people who might be not wanting to be there or very defensive? Or are there some people who are just uncontrollable talkers? Are there some people who might feel like they're being challenged in a negative way that we can bring round? And I always talk about that with, my stakeholder or somebody who will be helping me to understand that group. And then you should always plan for it. So, if there's someone who really is very disruptive and they know that, we need to talk to them beforehand and say, look, this is the way it's going to work. Are you okay with that? We won't give you the chance to do this. If you don't agree, is it a good idea for you to just let us do the workshop? We'll come back to you with some answers, or prepare in advance. One of the easiest ways to prepare is to put people into the right teams. So, again, teams of 3 or 4. And if there's one very, very difficult or dominant person, put them with somebody else who maybe they trust or who can help them to understand or behave in a certain way. Something else I sometimes do is, and this is not for the whole day, but in rotation. If there's a couple of very dominant or talkative or difficult people, put them all in the same group and let them just do it to each other so that everybody else can get on with the work. The thing is, though, as you know, Miriam, you don't always know who people are. And in fact, as an independent facilitator, you are seeing them as they walk in. And so I tend to try and make my own opinion as people walk in. And the first thing that I do when people walk into the room is I go and introduce myself straight away in a really friendly, encouraging way, shake their hand. And even in that interaction, you can often see someone who doesn't want to speak to you or somebody who is very positive and wants to ask you a question. And you can start to think, okay, I need to help that person because they are not wanting to be here or struggling. So, you know, I also spend the first hour really observing people and then working out what I'm going to do with them. So sometimes you can put people into pairs if they are introverts and they don't seem to be saying anything in a bigger group, you know. So you have to constantly be managing different people and different personalities. Thing is, though, I'm sure it's the same with you. Once you've done it for 20 years, you know, you have some schema, don't you, that you can, that you can apply, and you can go, I know who you are. I know who you are. I sometimes feel like I'm Miss Marple in Agatha Christie. I don't know if you've ever read Miss Marple, but she always has an example of someone in the past, and she says, oh, you remind me of that person. That's how I feel about people in workshops. You know, I think, I can see.
And it's a very helpful chapter in your book, in the workshop book, about how to deal with the different personalities and what might be strategies or tactics. Control them.
And I mean, I think as I said in the book, the most important thing is you have to intervene. You have to do something. You can't just let it go and hope for the best. Because I've made that mistake. I've made that mistake with the most dominant person in the room, who just sat there at the front of the room on his laptop, even though I'd said, please put away laptops and phones. And he was the boss of everyone else in the room. And so he just sat there, and I thought, oh, I can't really say anything. And then the whole thing was a complete waste of time for everybody because he wasn't participating. You know, I've made all of those mistakes. Even if it means stopping the workshop and saying, look, do you mind if we just take 10 minutes break? And then saying to that person, look, this is really quite destructive. So should we not have the workshop anymore if you don't want to participate? Or would you like to go and do your emails somewhere else? I mean, I've done things like put the boss who won't get off their laptop, just put them in the back of the room. Say, would you mind sitting over there so that nobody else can see you, you know? But you have to do something.
Exactly, because otherwise you risk your authority. And I think once the group doubts the authority of the facilitator, they start doubting every instruction and every exercise, and then you have this noise that slowly gets into the room, and then the focus is away. No, I agree.
It's completely right. And don't forget, you know, the importance of our authority as facilitators is not for us. It's not for the ego. The importance is on behalf of the group. We are in service of the whole group. We're there to make the whole group work. And so if we lose that authority, we've lost it on behalf of the group.
Exactly.
We've let one person disrespect the whole group. You know,
you cannot make the process easy if the group or yourself doubt the process.
No, it's true. And actually, one thing that I often say when I'm training people to run workshops, especially British people who tend to be quite apologetic, you know, modest, is please do not apologize the whole time. Stop saying sorry. Like, you know, we're there. Our role is to represent the group. Don't apologize for standing at the front of the room. Don't apologize for saying, oh, sorry, here's another exercise. Oh, sorry, there's not enough time left. Just stop with the sorries, right? And the other thing I always say is, you know, try not to point out mistakes, because let's say there's a typo on the slide. Don't go, oh, there's a typo on the slide. Just because all you're doing is creating that little dissonance in people, like, what? Oh, something's wrong. Or, you know, we were supposed to have this printing, but now we've got this one. Or, you know, we've only got 10 minutes left and we thought we had 2 hours left, but that exercise took too long. Don't say it like that. You know, say, we've made a choice to use our time in this way for the purpose of the objective, not a sorry or an apology or a pointing out what's wrong.
Yeah, this confidence and maybe maturity as well in terms of facilitating. Good point. Before we continue the show, let me take a brief moment to thank our sponsor Session Lab. Are you using Excel or Word to prepare and schedule your workshops? Try something that is designed for facilitators. With an easy-to-use drag-and-drop agenda builder, Session Lab allows you to be free and creative in your workshop process design. Session Lab also comes with an immense built-in library of workshop activities and facilitation techniques to help you to find new inspiration for your sessions. Stop messing with spreadsheets and focus on designing engaging workshops. Try it as sessionlab.com. I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't believe in its value myself. I would like to speak about your bridge project.
Sure.
And because you introduced it to me in our briefing call that we had last week, I guess. And I think it's a fascinating project on many different levels with different stakeholders, but maybe you're the better person to just explain what it's about.
Yes. So as I said, I've been doing workshops for 20 years. Most of the workshops that I've been running have been in insight generation, consumer insight, new product development, innovation, idea generation. And most of the time that's been for, in wonderful, very interesting categories like new laundry products, new toothpaste products, new shampoo products, new software ideas, at helping people to create products that are saleable by commercial businesses. I love that work. It's very exciting. What I love about it is you truly understand consumers and the people who buy products. And if you understand people properly, you can provide them with products that really make their lives better. So I truly believe that. I'd never worked in the public sector before. And I moved to Portsmouth 4 years ago. I was busy enough at work. I just launched the workshop book. But I thought to myself that I wanted to get into a more challenging area for me. And I didn't know whether it would work or not. So through contacting my local elected members and politicians and through really trying hard to get to talk to someone, I offered my services for free to say, look, I'd love to do something more challenging. I don't know if it'll work, but we should try using these facilitation techniques in the public sector. And I met this woman called Louise Wilders, who was at the time head of communications for Portsmouth City Council. And when you meet somebody who just unlocks something because they understand and trust you and they can see the possibilities, even if they're not sure whether it'll work either.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So Louise had a project for me and I said, give me a difficult one. And she said, yeah, this is a difficult one. Which was, the context was that in general in the UK over the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's been a period of austerity. So funding on every level for public service has gone down. And in particular, the voluntary and community sector, which is people who run small neighborhood organizations or charities, or big charities, had less and less funding from the local government, from the local council. Now, I didn't know any of this, by the way, 4 years ago, but those people who run these small neighborhood charities and the bigger charities in a local area keep the community going. These are amazing people who do something out of a sense of purpose and passion, often with personal lived experience. They are incredible people. But what was happening was, because they'd had less and less funding, they were starting to try and hide information from each other or compete with each other for money, which is a natural thing for anyone to do in any organization. And also, there was a lot of breakdown of trust between them and the local government, Portsmouth City Council. And so Louise came to me with this project, which was, could we run a workshop to bring everybody together to see if we can work well together? And at the time, I was relatively naive, so I didn't know any of this background, but I brought everybody into one room and we did some prep work where we asked people to tell us what their opinions were about the state of things in advance. And quite quickly, it was a very difficult workshop. People had a lot of passion, but a lot of mistrust that they'd built up. Anyway, through the process of our techniques that we now use all the time, Miriam, and I'm very happy to share them with you. One of the main ones is the visioning technique. We brought together people to create a vision for the city. And we did that in small teams, and we have a couple of different visioning techniques. One is the planet, one is the newspaper headline, and one is 4 futures. And in small teams, people created a vision for the future of the city in 5 years' time when it was brilliantly successful.
Mm.
And what they did was, in this creative, emotional exercise, they realized that they were all wanting the same thing.
Mm.
Everybody wanted the same thing for the people of Portsmouth. And that's why people work in the public sector and in the voluntary and community sector. And coming from a commercial background, I'd never worked with people like this who are genuinely in it for the people of the place.
Mm.
And when they realized they all wanted the same thing, that broke down that mistrust and gave people a renewed sense of collaboration and purpose together, which made it so much more easy then to create projects and initiatives that everyone worked on together.
Yeah. This sounds almost too good to be true. Imagining that, okay, this group of diverse people from different interest groups work on their visions, then they have the aha, oh, we all think of the same headline, newspaper headline, let's work together. I assume that you still need to facilitate this aha moment, that it might not be natural or instinctive to really see that actually we all agree on the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, yes. So the first thing that you do with a visioning exercise is you have to, again, very respectfully and not in a too much of a creative or playful way. Otherwise, people just think that you're wasting their time. You have to very respectfully explain why it's important to do a vision. So you have to say, look, this might feel like a waste of time. I'm going to give you some colored pens. I'm going to ask you to imagine something that's, unrealistically optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something very idealistic, but it's important for us to create that so that we can all see what our vision is before we come back into the nitty-gritty. So you have to respectfully help people to understand why it's an important use of their time. The second thing you do is you split people up into small groups. So 3 or 4 people working, and they can choose which of the visioning exercise they want to do. So they could choose the planet, which is the much more creative one that's all about drawings and colored pens, or they can choose the safer one, which is the newspaper headline, which is just, what's a newspaper front page in 5 years' time, which feels a bit more safe. Or there's the 4 futures one. So they have an element of control because they can choose between being playful or being rational, and that's fine. And you often find that fewer people do the more creative and then more people do the headline. But Miriam, they're working in, let's say, 5 different groups. So you get 5 different visions. Now, you don't have to then vote on the favorite vision. Those visions all bring together similar themes, all give people a new sense of excitement. So they inspire each other. And actually what you're after is the feeling of people being aligned more than the very specifics of what the actual vision is that we agreed. And once people are aligned, because everyone's going, oh, that's brilliant, the different visions, they're not in opposition to each other, they're all similar theme. Then you step back and you say, what are we going to do about it?
True. And I can perfectly see that this contagious feeling of passion and seeing, oh, we're sharing the same passion and other people are as enthusiastic about this vision of a better future as me. How did you encounter the fact that you have different stakeholders coming together, and some of them are from civil society, from NGOs, and others are maybe from politics? So in real life or outside this workshop, outside this project, they do have decision-making power. And still they're coming together for this more collaborative, maybe hierarchy-free setting.
You do have to prepare people in advance. So if you've got elected members or politicians or VIPs or senior hierarchies there, you do need to make sure that in advance they understand what they're coming to. So, it's not a platform for you to do a speech. You're not going to be like Simon Cowell making a decision, yes or no, as people say answers. This is a truly collaborative session, so you will participate fully. We tend not to have any budgets or kind of decision-making specifics before a workshop. So we would never say, come to the workshop and at the end someone will win £30,000. We would never say that.
Yeah.
In fact, what does happen is money does come from these engagements because the decision makers were in the room and felt the vision and felt the alignment, and then believed in the people who were there, and then they're able to decide who they would like to invite to pitch for a certain idea. But we never associate it with money or decision making. We associate it with collaboration and engagement and alignment, and the money and the decision making naturally comes.
Yeah, which brings back the idea of the priming, that as soon as you prime participants on the topic of money and decisions, then the pure business context, in the competition context, in the hierarchy context, and might not be mentally ready to collaborate and to go into these creative spheres.
Exactly. Priming is very, very important. And then, controlling people on the day as well. But I think one of the things that we have found, it's been probably one of our biggest challenges, is in fact, you do need a stakeholder before one of these Project Bridge workshops. You need someone who is a decision maker from that perspective, and you need them to commit to participating in and trusting the workshop to take it somewhere rather than trying to control it. And you need them to commit to taking actions and initiatives afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's been probably our biggest learning, is even if the workshop is amazing, someone needs to actually make it happen afterwards. And that can't be the facilitator. That needs to be the person who is the main stakeholder. So that's something that we've learned in the last couple of years, which we make more clear now and we help people with.
Where would you draw the line of your responsibility as a facilitator to follow up and to make the follow-up easy for
Personally,
the stakeholders?
I don't. I draw the line to say I'm the facilitator, the actions are yours. However, you do need to somehow make people accountable. So whether that's, at the end of the workshop, everybody in the room commits to doing one thing, I write it down, I put that in the output document. So I've made them accountable to, suggesting a follow-up workshop. Often it's not just one workshop, it's two. So, what are we doing for the next one? This is what we learned in the last one. Yeah. It's a difficult line, but in order to stay independent, I don't get involved in any of the decision making. It's truly the team's decision.
And otherwise you quickly become or turn into a project manager.
Definitely. And
you don't want to do that.
No, that's not my talent.
Yeah. And not your role anyway. Yes.
No. So, no, it's been incredible. And Miriam, I have my own vision about Project Bridge, and I'd love to invite every single one of your listeners to participate in it with me. This is a set of tools which are super simple for a clever facilitator to do. Anyone who's had any facilitation experience will be able to do them. And with just a tiny bit of training and mentoring from my team, I would like for every single facilitator that I know to go and volunteer in their local area to run these projects between the public sector, the voluntary and community sector, so that they can make a difference. Because we come with skills which are maybe from a commercial background, maybe from a learning and development background, but we come with independence and fresh perspectives. Yeah. And only we could be those people in a setting where they could really benefit. So my vision is that every single facilitator in my team, of which we have around 20, will go and volunteer to facilitate just one project in their local area and make a difference. Beautiful. In that way. And I just feel like we could do it all over the world. We know it works. There's so many facilities and resources we can offer and advice we can offer. And I think it's possible.
Beautiful. I will put all the information in the show notes so that the audience, dear facilitators, reach out to Pam.
Yeah, great.
Become active in your community. That's beautiful. I would also like to spend just a brief moment to talk about your new project, your new book about team collaboration and new ways of work. And I wonder what you might have learned from this bridging project, where you don't have teams, but these diverse group of people with maybe the same vision, but still different agendas. What did you learn from working with them on your work, on your study research about new ways of teamwork?
Great question. What I've learned from Project Bridge is my work always had meaning. I always have had this motivation to make people more positive, more collaborative, more constructive with each other. That's what drives me. But now in working in my local community, on the streets that I see every day, with the people I see every day, I've learned that there are such amazing, good, clever people out there who dedicate their lives to communities. And there are people out there who have very difficult lives, and so I've learned to be more sympathetic, empathetic. I've learned to understand how complicated and difficult people's lives are and how much support that anyone can give. So what does that mean for my new book? Well, it has always been the case, but more so now. We need to have meaning in our work. We need to have a higher purpose or a deeper meaning, or both. That's the energy that takes us to doing amazing work rather than just average work. And I come from a commercial background. I've always been in a business role making money. I don't think you have to not make money either, but if you can find a deeper meaning or a higher purpose in your work, it will make that team work well together. So in my new book, which is all about the future of teamwork, how to supercharge teams, how to really make the most of any team that you're in, one of the most important chapters for me is how to find meaning in your work, even if you're in a team that you really don't enjoy being in, even if you're in a team that you don't get along with the people, even if you're in a team which you wish you weren't in for some reason, like the work is not what you want to be doing. I personally believe that you can find meaning even in that situation. It's not to say you have to force yourself to stay in that situation. Maybe you can leave. But if you're in a situation which you are finding unproductive or negative, there are ways of finding meaning. And maybe the meaning is in learning about the people around you, or putting yourself into a challenging situation which you do end up controlling, or observing human nature, or being a good example to the people around you. Whatever that meaning is, I feel like we can find it consciously and we can enhance it so that no matter which team we're in, we can carry that energy further and do a better job.
So would that mean that for a team workshop, you would also start with the visioning technique that you described?
So the new book is all about supercharged teams. And one of the most important things I feel we have to do is, first of all, work out whether you need to be a team or not, because we attach teams to everything, and some things just don't need a team. Some things someone can just do by themselves, right?
So how would you define a team? What's the difference between a team and a group of people working together?
Well, I think you have to define it yourself. For your team, for your objective, you have to define it yourself. And so I worry that, for example, in a big company, you say, oh, you're on this team. And then because other teams have always done it this way, you meet once a month and you meet for 2 hours and you do an update that takes an hour, and then everybody does something else that takes an hour. And you've been predefined in your team by some habits belonging to something completely different. Whereas, why are you meeting every month? Why don't you meet every week? Why don't you meet every day? Why don't you give yourself 2 weeks to do this team rather than 2 years? So I think there's a problem with the word team, because I think we all assume we know what it is. But until we've defined it ourselves, we're not doing a great job as a team. So the individuals in that team have to come together and define what the team is, not just what it will do, because that's the thing we do tend to do. We decide what we're going to achieve, but we never decide why. What's the deeper purpose for each of us and for the project? And we also don't think how. How are we going to make this happen? Does it need to be we meet every month for 2 years? Or could we never meet and we all just do everything virtually? And I don't know, maybe we spend 1 day together every year coming together. Or could it be that there's, a team of 10, 3 of them meet every week, but the rest of us just give our comments to those 3? We need to reset, re-engage, redefine what every single team is. Even if you're in one that's been working for a long time, reset and redefine it.
In the context of working with teams, what would be your favorite exercise?
One of the exercises I use a lot now is the visioning exercise. So a visioning exercise is about not getting stuck in the small, tactical, short-term details of what needs to be done, but reframing a wider and a bigger perspective that looks into the future and really defining what success looks and feels like. So whether you're a team of people creating a new product or a new social charity, whether you're trying to reduce conflict in a particular situation, you won't get anything different if you try and take small steps towards it. You need to, first of all, stop and look at what a successful future could be. And in that way, it's both inspirational because you get this feeling of hope of what you could achieve, but it's also directional. It makes you realize actually that is the main direction, not this small action here or here. And if every action goes towards a greater vision, then we will get there. So visioning techniques are a super alignment technique. They're very creative because they inspire ideas. As soon as there's a great vision, people have tons of ideas. They imply a way of working because they have values and purpose attached to them. And they also give you measures of success.
I totally agree. And still there's something that, especially when working with the team and relating to what you mentioned before in the Bridge project, that you wouldn't judge on the visions. So the definition of different visions is just good enough to see that we have alignment and that we share the sense of purpose. However, for a team, I can imagine that it can be quite disturbing to have several different visions that are maybe aligned, maybe not, and then not taking the time to actually take a decision. So what is actually our shared vision? Because a team can only have one, I suppose.
Okay, that's a good point. So I would definitely do a visioning exercise at the start of any team or project, but then I would turn that into a project scope. So at that point, that's a new technique where you say, right, what are the measures of success of this? We will know we've been successful when these three things have happened. What's in scope for this project are these things. What's out of scope we're not going to cover is those things. Who are the key influences in this project? Who are our key clients that we need to benefit in this project? So we would scope it out then as a result of the vision. But the vision remains very optimistic, idealistic, and directional, whereas the scope becomes, okay, what are we and aren't we going to agree on?
Has it ever happened to you that such a visioning discussion or exercise would derail? That one team member says, oh, I see our team in 5 years in this direction, and someone else has an entire opposing view? Because this can totally hijack the purpose of the workshop or meeting.
I guess I've never had that situation. I suppose because I treat the vision as a creative exercise, not as a decision exercise.
Okay.
So the visions are to inspire each other, and then they inspire, okay, what is our measure of success, or what is our project scope, or what are our timings and deliverables? They're inspiration rather than decisions.
Yeah, makes sense. With everything that you have been doing and are still doing, it's so diverse with all these different projects. If you had to summarize yourself as one hashtag, what would it be?
I'm going to say #supercharge.
Nice. In line with the new book.
Well, yes. And actually, your question made me think that's a good hashtag. I never thought of it. But to be honest, it's what I've always done, and it's what any facilitator always does. We take people's time, we take people's attention, we take people's talent, and we supercharge it into one situation where we make something happen. That is what we do.
Beautiful. Nothing to add. I would just leave it there. Let it sink. Take notes. Write it down.
We supercharge, don't we? That's what we do.
Awesome. After almost 1 hour of conversation, imagine a listener fell asleep after minute 1, just woke up and doesn't have time to listen to everything again. What would you like this person to know?
Anyone can be a workshop facilitator. It just requires a bit of preparation and a little bit of inner confidence to take control, because you've thought about it more than the other people in the room. They want you to take control. They want you to help them, and you're there in service of the group. So it's not about your ego. It's about making the best situation for everyone in that time and in that team. So go for it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pam. If someone wants to reach out now to either get in touch regarding the bridging project, or wants to hire you, wants to work with your company, wants to stay in touch to not miss the release of your new book, how can they reach you?
I think the best way, Miriam, is probably by LinkedIn, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm super happy to have people introduce themselves to me on LinkedIn from this podcast, and I will link with them immediately, and we can talk about any projects. And I'm always happy to give advice to anyone about Project Bridge or anything else. So, don't hesitate. I love talking about this stuff, so I'd love to be contacted.
Perfect. Put it in the show notes, and then everyone can just click on it.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, Miriam, feel free to share my email address when you think it's necessary. I'm super happy with that, but probably LinkedIn is a better way to do it.
Absolutely. And I will put the URL of Paraffin in there as well. And then people can find you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.